Welcome to the Self-Growth Nerds podcast, where we help you embrace the most courageous version of yourself. My name is Marie, and I'm an adventure seeker who is obsessed with following the joy and creating more freedom. If you're eager for deep conversations, big questions, and meaningful connection, join me on the quest to discovering how we can live a more magical and memorable life. Hello nerds! How are you feeling today? I'm really good because today is part 2 of the 10 life lessons I learned from Thru-Hiking series. I hope you can take a moment now to forget about everything that's going on in your day and settle down with me here for the next 20 or so minutes. If you haven't listened to last week's episode, go listen to that one first so you can get the whole story. All right, so where did we leave it last time? After the Sierra Nevada, right? So because my trail family and I flip-flopped, we didn't finish hiking the state of California at the border of Oregon like most people do. We finished in Quincy. Flip-flopping is kind of annoying like that because you're always counting in your head the number of miles you've hiked and you don't get to celebrate the milestones like everybody else. But Ollie made it to the road in Quincy before us and he created a sort of finish line on the trail with his trekking poles and a stick so that we could pretend to cross the border into Oregon. When we were in Quincy, Wiki's mom flew from Wisconsin to California. She rented a big car and picked us up, stinky hiker, and drove us all the way up to Callahan's Lodge in Oregon, where we'd started hiking south 2 months before. The next morning was my 30th birthday, and I had 26 miles to hike. To be honest, that day was the first one I wished I was home with my friends, doing anything except hiking a marathon. But time was flying and I needed to chase Canada. So I packed up my tent, which was behind the lodge, and I went inside, where Perks Reset and Little Demon had ordered a mimosa for me, as well as a pancake with one little candle in the middle. Little Demon gave me a fancy chocolate bar and they said they'd made a Spotify playlist for my birthday and asked all the other rich kids to add their favorite songs on it. I still have it. It's called something like Poppin's Birthday Beats, I think. We started hiking that day and Ollie left little love notes on the trail for me to find that he'd written with my friends. And at sunset, we stopped to eat dinner with Little Demon. And Ollie pulled out a bottle of bubbles he'd been secretly carrying that day for us to enjoy. I was very happy, but I was also very sad at the same time. We hiked until 10 p.m. that night because we had left the lodge so late. And 1 mile before camp, we stopped at a river, and I dropped my Sawyer filter in the water. When I stretched my arm to catch it, I fell face first in the water. That was my 30th birthday gift, I guess. The next morning, we were to hike our first 30-mile day to Fish Lake Resort, and it was really hard. This leads me to lesson number 6. Southern Oregon is when I hit another wall. I was completely sick and tired of walking. I was sad and frustrated. I thought the days were long, and through my negativity glasses, I found the landscapes to be boring. Sorry, Oregon, you're not boring, I swear. All we did was wake up, hike, barely have time for a lunch break, hike, until the sun goes down, and often also after the sun went down. For hours on end, it was just me and my thoughts were not glorious at that time. I looked for problems and then I zoomed in on them for hours. Whether it be a moment that happened 10 years ago or something someone said to me last year, or a conversation I had with an arrogant day hiker who said he thru-hiked in 1983 and how much better it was back then, and oh, by the way, you should pick up the pace if you want to finish in time. My brain was getting really good at focusing on the negative. In order to keep going and enjoy my last month on trail, I had to learn to zoom out. We're not our thoughts. Our thoughts are influenced by our past, by the culture we live in. They're like a 24/7 radio that we cannot turn off. But we don't have to listen to every word that radio says. The Hindu teacher Nisargadatta Maharaj, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, said that it has nothing to do with effort. Just turn away, look between the thoughts rather than at the thoughts. When you happen to walk in a crowd, you don't fight every man that you meet. You just find your way in between. When you fight, you invite a fight. But when you do not resist, you meet no resistance. When you refuse to play the game, you are out of it. The way I like to think of it is to imagine my thoughts as helium balloons. I can look at them fly around me and choose which one I want to grab onto and get carried away with. I can even create my own balloons if none of them are interesting or helpful. For example, if my brain was feeling particularly negative on a given day, I gave it a task, like, now brain, think about a creative project we can work on when we get back. Okay, now brain, write the first chapter of our book. Brain, think about trail names for the members of your family, stuff like that. A more light-hearted occupation for my head to work on. A lot more useful as well. That's how I came up with the idea for the post-trail book that I created when I came back, and also the whole book I wrote in the summer of 2020. But our brains don't necessarily come up with those naturally. Sometimes we gotta help, just like giving a toddler something to do so it doesn't mess up the whole house. Don't let your thoughts mess up a beautiful sunny day in the mountains, is lesson number 6. Lesson number 7, Northern Oregon. By that time, our trail family was reduced to 2 people, me and Little Demon, also known as Anna. It's somewhere around mile 2000 that something important finally clicked in me. Stop comparing yourself to others and quit beating yourself up into hiking the same way that they do. Respect your rhythm and hike your own damn hike. At first, I thought maybe it wouldn't be as much fun to be in a smaller group, but boy was I wrong. As much as I loved the friends that I made along the way, being alone with Lil D released so much of the pressure of catching up and of making it somewhere in time. Anna and I had the same pace. We both loved to wake up late, we didn't put pressure on each other, we made each other laugh, shouting things like bagels in a canyon. We wrote dumb, encouraging messages for each other in the dirt. We spoke through the walls of our tent at night. We developed a really sweet chemistry. When we made it to Timberline Lodge, our last resupply of Oregon was waiting. We found a table in the fancy lobby to unpack our boxes and to catch up with our messages from the outside world. And out of the blue, a couple appeared. They looked to be in their early 50s. They asked us what we were doing and if they could take pictures. The woman said her friend had hiked the PCT back in the days and she'd be happy to see that women were still doing so today. They left and we figured we'd better start packing up. I told Anna how sweet I thought that they were, and just as I was saying that, they popped up again. The man said, "We want to offer something, but we don't want it to be weird. We'd love to pay for a cozy room for the 2 of you. You don't need to tell us your names. We just want to be nice. We dropped off our daughter at college earlier and feel a bit sad and want to do something kind. So think about it. Let us know. We'll sit over there. You don't have to say yes. No pressure." And they left. Anna and I looked at each other with wide eyes and let out a little nervous laugh. We started whispering, "What should we do? We have to make it to Cascade Locks the day after tomorrow, but we can't say no. They seem trustworthy. The man kind of looks like a younger Bernie Sanders. Oh my God. We'll just have to get up early and hike 30 miles tomorrow. Okay, let's go see them." So, just like that, Little Demon and Poppins got to spend a night in the most beautiful room of a historic hotel. Walls made of thick wood, hand-woven blankets, soft sheets. We were like excited little girls. The next morning, we had to wake up in the dark and we left a letter for them at the reception desk. We drank some coffee as the sun rose on Mount Hood, and I took advantage of the toilet before going back out into the woods. When I was in the cubicle, I texted Anna some smiling poop emojis while she was waiting for me to hit the trail. Then we left this dreamy place behind, refreshed and ready for the next stretch. The truth of the matter is, I would never have found this closeness with Anna if I'd kept pushing myself to hike someone else's hike. I would not have deepened my love for her and created those amazing memories if I'd decided to follow the crowd of people who crushed 30+ mile days. So ask yourself what you want to do. Embrace your own pace, no matter how fast or how slow it is, and trust that it will bring you what you need. What I needed was a tight-knit little unit of love and silliness to take me through the last stretch. Lesson number 8. Washington. We crossed the bridge of the gods into a completely different universe. It was cold, foggy, and rainy. September in Washington was harsh from day one. Thankfully though, we had Anna's dad and sister there with us that first week to alleviate our troubles. They'd rented a car and they would pick us up sometimes at random road crossings at night with takeout food and drive us to the nearest motel so we could dry our stuff and sleep well. We felt so bad when we got back on the trail in the morning to miserable hikers whose gear was completely soaked because it didn't stop raining. But eventually Mike and Maggie had to leave and Anna and I discovered what Washington was really like, at least in September. Rain gear is just a momentary relief. Everything eventually gets wet. I mean, we had to wring our socks in the morning before putting them on. And have you ever tried to pull your pants down when you cannot feel your fingers anymore because they're so cold? It's not funny. But we had to make it funny because being annoyed with the discomfort would have only made it worse. So we sat in the cold-ass wind, putting gummies up our nose to forget about the weather. There are moments where I felt a hint of despair, I'm not gonna lie. But I let it wash over me with the rain, thinking, yes, it's tough, but I'm tough enough. And we shouted things like, I'm having so much fun, don't you just love the PCT? Washington is where I learned to be in total acceptance of the suck. Little did I know it was gonna get worse. When we made it to Thru-Hiking, the last village on the trail, there was a quote-unquote hazardous winter storm warning. Normally, we'd have 4 days of hiking left, but who knew how long it was gonna take in bad conditions? My mom was already in Vancouver waiting for us, and I was having flashbacks from 10th grade when she came to pick me up at school, but had to wait for hours in the car while I struggled through my maths exam. Don't worry about me, she texted me. She said, take your time. But still, I was kind of worried. And to make matters worse, the man behind the counter at the corner store, the general store, said something like, you know, guys, once winter starts over here, it doesn't stop. We were afraid. But the worst of the storm seemed to be around Rainy Pass, and we figured it might be over by the time we got there 2 days later. I received a text from our friend, Academic Man. He wrote, I made it to Canada. It was horrible. I tried to sleep in the privy, but it was too cold, so I had to hike 46 miles through the night. There was a selfie of him taken at night with the monument behind him. He had a large smile, shiny eyes. His message sent a shot of adrenaline through my veins. We were so close and we had to keep going. We took our last shower, packed our last resupply, and leaving Thru-Hiking, my heart was breaking a little bit and full of love all at once. We took a picture of our backpacks with our bags of chips strapped to the top. One last walk out of town. Ollie texted me, after this, all that will be left is memories. My eyes filled up with water and we hiked out into the early evening. We were 60 miles from Canada when the snow started falling. It was cute, actually, almost fairy tale-like. I looked up at the White Mountains and tried to imagine what it might be like to be up there. I knew we had to gain a lot of elevation before descending back into Canada. We made it to Rainy Place late that afternoon. Earlier that day, Rooster had written in the trail register, had to turn back, snow to my hips. We looked at each other anxiously. At that point, there was 3 of us, me, Anna, and Over Easy. According to the forecast, the storm was dying down, and we figured we didn't have time to hang out in town because the next storm was right around the corner. Our time window was closing. I suggested that we set up camp a mile from the trailhead and let it melt overnight. Over Easy found beers at the trailhead that a trail angel had left there for us. He downed a few of them before we started hiking to the nearest campsite. He said, "I'm from LA, I was not made for this much snow." And we laughed. When we got to the campsite, it was actually covered in a few feet of snow. We started pushing aside the snow with our feet, making jokes and dreading the cold night. We hadn't come equipped for winter camping. I was not freezing cold in my quilt, but not warm enough to sleep either. I rolled around all night, and so did the others. I could hear them. And at one point, Over Easy said, "Is it morning yet?" And half an hour later, we were all packed up, heading for Cutthroat Pass with all of our layers on. Over Easy led the way up the snow-covered trail. From Beach Boy to Snowpiercer, he was really fierce. We made it to the top 2 miles and 2 hours later. We took some celebratory pictures and tried to find the way down, but the north side of the pass was looking even worse. There was no way of telling where the trail was, but we knew we had to follow the exposed ridgeline. My right hand got cold as I checked the GPS every 10 minutes to make sure that we were close to the trail. Over Easy kept asking us, "Are we gonna die? Should we turn back? Should we turn back? What should we do?" While I tried to stay focused and keep my mind as empty as possible. There was a little voice in me pointing out that at this rate, we would be in Canada only a week later. We didn't have enough food, enough fuel, enough strength. I wondered if perhaps my mom could get food, buy pairs of snowshoes, rent a car, cross the border, and drive up the next dirt road. And then I stopped myself. I was like, oh my God, she's going to freak out when I try to explain all of this via text. Text on the InReach, because at that point we didn't have any reception, so I would have had to use my little beacon. Anyway, I interrupted my spiral of thoughts with tentative optimism. I thought, when we start going down in elevation, it's going to get easier for sure. No way there will be this much snow all the way to Canada, right? We made a turn around the narrow mountainside with a glimmer of hope that was quickly crushed by more of the same snowy, exposed ridgeline. Head down, we kept moving. Suddenly, Over Easy said, "I can't do this. I have to turn back. We can't even make a mile an hour." I said, "If you turn back now, Over Easy, it's over. That snow's not melting." He turned around anyway. Anna said she wanted to keep going, so we did, and Over Easy shouted he was already a few meters away. He said, "I love you girls, be safe!" There was no time for hugs and goodbyes. It felt pretty surreal, and there was urgency in the air. My left foot was getting really, really cold, so I sat down in the snow to put on a pair of dry socks, but first, I noticed that the small hole in the mesh of my Brooks Cascadia Trail Runners had teared open, and that the only thing separating my small toe from the snow was the fabric of my frozen socks. And I wanted to put dry socks on, but the laces of my shoes were completely frozen. I was gonna have to keep going. I started thinking, am I willing to lose a few toes to make it to Canada? And I'm ashamed to admit this now, but the answer that came up right away was yes, I absolutely am. So I kept moving, surrendering to the situation. 15 minutes later, a miracle happened. A red dot moving towards us fast. "Hello, I'm Sugar Rush, excuse me please," said a short man as he moved past us, kind of like Sonic the Hedgehog. I couldn't believe it, and Over Easy reappeared. He said, "I'm back! Sugar Rush convinced me to keep going. He said there's a herd of hikers coming behind him. We're doing this together." And suddenly there was hope. From that moment on, everything got easier. Sugar Rush carved out the way with the energy of a kid in a candy shop. We went down into the forest, dropped a few thousand feet in elevation, and there was snow on the ground, but the trail was clear. Anna and I sat on a rock to rest, finally. As I shoved handfuls of salty dill chips in my mouth, the others caught up with us. Taco salad and tight buns thanked us for the path we'd made up and down Cutthroat Pass. We smiled and said, "Thank you." We were exhausted, but we were so happy that we were going to make it all together. The next morning felt like the first day of spring. The air was crisp, but warm enough to hike in the fleece. The yellow larch trees poked out of the glimmering white snow. It was wonderful. About 15 of us hikers had lunch at Harts Pass, 30 miles from the Canadian border. I looked at everyone with the naked heart feeling of a tired child. You are all insanely beautiful. The next morning, we made it to the monument, and the wave of culminating pride I expected never arrived. This is where lesson number 9 comes in, and I'm getting a bit emotional. I'd pictured a silent last mile reflecting on the grandiosity of my achievement, but in reality, Perks and I were just having a casual chat about our partners. I'd pictured myself running to the monument and bursting into tears. But when we got there, there was people on the structure taking photos. I'd also pictured me jumping into Anna's arms and giving her a big hug, but I had to ask her to take her backpack off first. I'd pictured everyone cheering on our arrival, but they were just sitting there casually emptying their food bag and cracking jokes. So I sat on the ground with them and proceeded to shove food into my mouth as well. Lesson 9 is about why we set goals. I thought that reaching Canada would be the most beautiful moment in my life, but I was wrong. Lying in bed and deciding to thru-hike after years of self-doubt was a lot more meaningful. So was the last night in the desert, eating dinner with Sherlock, pep talk, doodles, and Chip, knowing we had made it to the first big milestone. Reaching the summit of Forester Pass, hiking up Muir Pass, crossing the Bridge of the Gods, making it another day in the Washington cold. Whenever I hear someone say, "It's not about the destination, it's about the journey," I kind of want to pull their head off. And yet, that's kind of what I'm telling you right now. But please bear with me. The reason I hated this cheesy sentence, especially when I was on the trail, is because I felt like it downplayed the meaning of accomplishment and all the efforts I was putting in to get to the destination. If it was truly about the journey, then why were we all pushing 28 miles in the rain? Why not just stop after 12 miles and swim in that beautiful alpine lake? That would definitely be a worthwhile form of travel. But that's not one that's going to have you break down into tears of joy and disbelief at the distance you have traveled with your own 2 feet. It's not one that will take you to the confines of who you are and what you can endure. While the journey is what we will remember, there wouldn't be any journey without a destination, or rather the idea of a destination. I say the idea of a destination because I found that the images of the monument that played in my mind as I hiked were far more meaningful than the actual wooden structure ever will be. While the monument is all I dreamed of some days, reaching it is not what mattered. We don't set goals for the goal itself. Goals act as a fuel to move us forward. They give meaning to our every step. They help us through the mud. Goals give us a direction to go in, without which we might feel lost. The direction might shift along the way, and that's okay. You may go home early or have to turn around in a snowstorm. You might slip and break your wrist on your way to Katahdin like my friend Sarah did, but that doesn't matter. You will already have done a lot more for yourself than most people ever will do. You will have found the courage to choose yourself and have developed rock-solid self-respect. But the trail doesn't fix it all. You have to uphold what you've learned once you get back into the real world. When we were in Vancouver, my friend Reset said something along the lines of, "I thought I was going to feel like less of a dud by the end of this, but I still kind of am." And he's not, obviously, far from it. But still, you cannot change how you feel inside with what you accomplish outside. Not in the long term anyway. Whether it's 2,653 miles, $1 million in the bank, or 300,000 followers on social media. Self-worth is not born out of impressive numbers. It's born out of showing up for yourself repeatedly, spending time alone laughing at your own jokes, surprising yourself with good decisions, improving your inner monologue. And that leads me to the last lesson. Lesson number 10 is about returning home. But you'll have to wait till next week. I'm sorry to do that to you, but this is getting long and I need to drink some water, and you also probably have stuff to do. So we'll keep the best stuff for next Monday. In the meantime, let's do a quick summary. Lesson number 6 was about looking through the thoughts in our brain instead of at the thoughts. Giving our brain useful things to think about instead of letting it dwell on whatever negative beliefs have been planted there by forces out of our control. Lesson number 7, what do you want to do? How do you want to proceed? Trust that respecting your own pace will bring you exactly what you need, exactly when you need it most. Lesson number 8 is total acceptance of what is. Letting the rain cover your face, surrendering to the suck, remembering that sometimes the only way out is through, and that resistance will only make the discomfort worse. And finally, lesson number 9, we don't set goals for the goal itself. We set goals so that we have a reason to get up in the morning, so we have something meaningful to push us forward through the hard times. Speaking of which, if you want someone to help push you forward, I'm launching a 6-month coaching program for people who are serious about changing their life and want to get rid of all that constant hesitation and learn to go for it more. Right now, it's only available to people on my email list, but you can message me on Instagram at selfgrowthnerds and I'll tell you more about it. Make sure you get in touch before the public launch on April 15th because there's early bird pricing available until then. Okay, lots to think about. I hope that at least one thing resonated with you amongst all the gems I threw in the air today. Let me know if you had any breakthroughs, and otherwise I will see you next week. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so it pops up on your app every Monday morning. All right? Bye-bye. You just listened to the Self-Growth Nerds podcast. I hope you enjoyed. We publish an episode every Monday, so make sure to subscribe if you want to be notified. I want to thank my friend Etienne Garano for editing this, and I want to thank you, kind-hearted souls, for doing the inner work necessary to grow into your truest self and make the world a better, more beautiful place. My name is Marie, and I will talk to you next week.